Over the last 16 years, I've spent my career as a stockbroker, a financial consultant, a project manager, a business analyst, and then even a capital planning investment control subject matter expert. And these are the 8 worst questions that I have received over my career. Hey, what's going on? This is Maoli Vodi with Financially Present. If you're new here, welcome. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out. And if you're not new here, welcome back. I appreciate you for supporting the channel. And to be clear, these are the worst questions that I've received over my career, but at the same time too, it's not that I hate answering them. I have no problem answering them and I actually enjoy it. This is why I do Financially Present, is to make sure that I'm helping and educating the community as best as possible. But at the end of the day, these questions are somewhat annoying because of how the industry is designed and people are just not well notified of these things or not educated on them well enough. So these questions come up so often and they're not just a quick one-off answer. There are so many layers to it and it helps keep certain people in and certain people out, and that's what I don't like. Okay, so all of these 8 questions are ranked from least worst all the way to the ultimate worst question. So make sure you stay to the end. But first question that I get from time, actually a lot of times, is what investment books should I read? And now this is frustrating because at the same time, we know some books are easier to read than others. I know for me, I need something to drag me along from one end of the book to the other, especially if it's a long and boring book. And then there's other books where they're just so easy to read. I'm a big self-help, practical book reader in the sense that like I have trouble reading fantasy books and things that are very, I don't know, hard to visualize in reality. But I know for me that if something relatable, it's easier to read. So when it comes to these book recommendations, I have to know what type of books you actually like already so that I can recommend the proper book. Because when it comes to finance books or investing books, some of them have a wealth of knowledge, but they are so boring and so heavy. So in order to answer this question, I'm gonna put on the hat that you are interested in books that will make you interested more in investing. And with that mindset, I have 3 books that I would recommend. And it's not to knock any other book, and it's also not to say that these are the 3 best books, but if I wanted to encourage you to read more finance books, I would give you these 3 books because they help with the mindset that's required to want to invest and do better, to read more, and to invest more. So those 3 books are The Psychology of Money, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then lastly, Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. And because why not? But these books, not that I'm saying that they're better than other books, but they are designed, especially if you read them in that order, to help you continue to be interested and engaged in building wealth. If there are other books that you think I need to swap one of those out with, let me know in the comments below. But those books ultimately will help usher you into reading more finance books or investing books. There are obviously more books out there that are probably better, but then also take a different approach to investing or building wealth. Some of them are more tailored towards budgeting or cutting things out or working on specific habits. Like those books, they're a little bit different. That's why I didn't include them in this response. But at the end of the day, there are other books, depending on where you are in your financial walk, that would work better for you. So I don't want to negate that. I want you to make sure that you read what's better for you. So I would need to know in order to recommend the right type of book. But that's why I don't like answering that question very much. The next worst question: what is better, Roth or traditional IRA? So obviously I don't like this question because it needs more context. It's related to your tax situation, so we need to know more about that before we can even talk about the right answer. And obviously, well, obvious to me, the Roth has a little bit more winning for it than the traditional IRA does. But in my opinion, you need to have both a Roth and a traditional IRA, because I err on the side of having better options, more options and better options. And you can have that with a traditional IRA and with a Roth IRA. When we talk about Roths and traditionals, it's more about how and when you get your tax break. That's the simplest way to say it. When it comes to traditional IRA, you get your tax break earlier, so right now. When When it comes to the Roth, you get your tax break later on in the future. So it's nice to have some tax-free money. But there are people, I would say CPAs and even financial planners, that will argue that it's still good to have taxable money because you can take advantage of the tax code that we so graciously love, but you can actually benefit from these tax cuts or these reductions or specific benefits in the tax code if you have taxable money. If you don't have that, if all of your money is tax-free, then you're technically missing out. Not to say that there's something completely wrong with money being tax-free. So consider it as that. You'll be missing out if you don't have taxable money that you can use to get tax benefits from. And if there's any questions you have about that, I actually have another video about the differences of these specific accounts, which will be linked here or below the video. The next worst question, in my opinion, should I borrow money to invest? First of all, when I hear this question, I cringe and I slowly die on the inside. Not because you're asking it, but mostly because it's generally a question that comes from maybe someone who's younger or someone who felt like they got a late start with investing. And I feel your pain, but at the same time too, when it comes to borrow money to invest, investing is already something with a level of stress. When you invest, there is a possibility that you can lose all of your investment. That's first and foremost. Any conversation with investment needs to have risk involved. When you borrow and then invest, you are adding an additional layer of stress or insecurity with this investment. And now you may even negate any of the money that you brought to the table by having to pay interest. And then also, if you lose it, you're not only losing your money, you're losing someone else's. So my answer is always going to be a hard and fast no. If you actually do borrow money to invest, then odds are you might not even be watching this video. In fact, you might be the type that prefers to skydive when the rest of us are on a roller coaster. And that's okay. There's a place for you, obviously. That's perfectly fine, but not everybody is comfortable with that level of risk. And obviously borrowing will increase the risk when it comes to investing. So I'm always going to say no. And another thing, anyone who's borrowing to invest, it could very well work in the short term, but as a long-term strategy, it's just not beneficial. Unless you're a professional that is managing some type of hedge fund, it is not to your advantage. And even those people who are doing that, they have other means to support that level of engagement with the market. But for your average everyday investor, you have to take a long-term approach, and borrowing to invest to me is not a long-term approach. It's costly and it adds unnecessary risk. So it's always going to be a no for me. Another question I just don't really like, but it's on the easier side to answer, is where is the best place to open up an investment account? And I'm not going to say it depends. I personally prefer Charles Schwab. No, they are not paying me for this. No, I'm not endorsed by them. I do have about 11 accounts with Charles Schwab, and they've been at previous places before that. And I can tell you this, it has all of the resources that I would need as someone who's been investing for, at this rate, over about 16 years. But it also has what you would need as a beginning investor, and it's low cost. You know, they've been around 40 plus 50 years at minimum, and they have everything you need. This is not to knock any of the really good ones too, like Fidelity. I know they just recently had some things go on with a data breach, but Fidelity is still a really good company, and data breach can happen anywhere. Vanguard, E-Trade's pretty good, but I can tell you, for one, you will get everything you need with Schwab. And whether it's an active trader or a long-term investor, or you have somebody managing your money for you, or you partially want to do it on your own, you can get every flavor of investing there. And some of those other brokers may have some different limitations. So in answering this question, I have to understand what type of investor you are. If it's a newer brokerage firm that started in the last few years, I've looked them up. I was not very interested in the platform, or I wasn't swayed in the sense that I needed to transfer my money. And some of them don't have the right account types. You know, the resources aren't as deep or rich as an established broker. So That's why I stick with my answer of Schwab. The next question, which is not that good either, but relatively easy to answer, how many accounts should I have? So now, if you're single, I have an answer for you, and then if you're married, I have an answer for you. So for single people, I think at minimum you should have an individual brokerage account, a Roth IRA, and a traditional IRA, and you should be fine. Those three will allow you to do what you need to do and be able to take advantage of different tax implications or tax strategies, tax benefits. So the only other thing I would add to that is if someone wants to roll over an old 401k, but they don't want to mix it with their traditional IRA, then yeah, open up a separate rollover IRA, so a fourth account. That way you can keep those funds separate in the event that you want to roll it over to a new employer or a different type of investment, a non-standard investment. I won't get into that. But 4 accounts for a single person is perfectly fine. If you're married, I recommend a joint account with rights of survivorship, IRA, Roth IRA, and that's for both parties. So the husband and wife should have his own IRA, the wife should have her own Roth IRA. So that's already 5 accounts. And then if you have kids, then I would say a custodial account for each child, and then also a 529 plan for each child. Then lastly, if you own a business or if the child actually works, open a custodial Roth IRA. That will help them take advantage of tax-free withdrawals in the future. And they have a long timeline to continue working. And so if you employ them, they can make contributions, or they have actual W-2 income, you can also make contributions. And if this is something that you're not comfortable with, I have another video where I go over all of this. But this is a pretty easy question, but I feel like if people think through it a little bit more, they'll know that, hey, these are the right types of accounts to have. So not always my favorite to answer, but very simple to answer. All right, so I have 3 more left, and now we're getting to the weeds. These are the questions that I really don't like, and the number one ultimate worst question is on its way. The next question is, when should I sell my stock? When I hear this question, I have to tell people I don't know the answer myself. There's no appropriate time for me to tell you, and I'll unpack that a little bit. You see, when it comes to your investments, you have to think from the perspective of a long-term investing. This is completely different than someone who is day trading or swing trading. Like, they have a definitive answer of when they're going to sell their stock. They have an entry point and an exit point for their stock. Long-term investors, now it's a little bit harder. In fact, this is probably the hardest question to answer, but not as annoying as the other two. And the reason why I wouldn't know is because it's always going to be hindsight that's going to tell you whether you're right or wrong. So your selling can't be based on fear. It can't be based on some viral news. It can't be based on the political climate, because that happens every election cycle. It has to be based on your investment strategy and your goals, the whole reason why you opened up the account. So if your goal was to make sure that this was for your retirement, then if you're nearing retirement, then that should trigger why you should sell. If your risk is getting out of a line, then yes, sell, because it'll help you rebalance your portfolio and give you the right makeup of your portfolio. Or if you know that this money was meant for your child to go to college, then now you know that you're going to start pulling from it. So you do need to sell some of the investment. So it's not necessarily tied to the actual investment itself. It's tied to your goals and what you need it for. Because if the news is what scares you, you would have already sold it by now. And if we're talking about stocks and mutual funds, there are specific stocks, that honestly, you would already, if it's a stock that has to be sold because of the news, maybe it's not necessarily one that you want to hold long-term anyways, because again, we're putting our long-term investing hat on with this question. You have to understand that you can't easily be swayed by some of this news to sell your stock. And at the end of the day, it's all about you. Yes, you. Another question that people ask to me, is one of the worst, is what stocks do you own? So now this is complicated because, one, I used to be licensed, and when I left the industry, my licenses now get shelved. So I can speak freely, but at the same time too, I have a obligation, in my opinion, to society where I can't just randomly give you any advice without understanding that there's going to be some repercussions. So I could tell you what I invest in, but if I tell you a specific stock, but I've been invested in it for 8, 9, 10 years, I need to give you that context, because if I'm telling you that, you would interpret it as investment advice. And there's a likelihood that you might go ahead and buy that stock right now. If that stock went down 30%, I'm probably not selling. In fact, I'm not looking to sell. But how would you feel if your stock went down 30% and you just got in? Our climates are completely different, so it doesn't necessarily benefit you for me to tell you exactly what I own. There are some nuances between what I'm owning and what you're owning, and the timing and the strategy. There's so many layers of this, so it can't just be a cut and dry answer. So this is why I just don't like this question. And it still doesn't hold a candle to the last worst question. This is the ultimate worst question. And unfortunately, I feel like I get this one almost all the time. No matter who it is, the last most worst ultimate question is, what is the best stock to buy right now? And people ask this, I would say, probably too much. And I probably keep a straight face, but in my mind, I'm doing this face palm emoji because, again, like the similar answer before this, it's like, it's about the timing, it's about your strategy. It has so many other things to do with this, the stock is hot right now or what's performing. Telling you the stock that you should buy would be like you going into a restaurant and sitting there, and then as the waiter comes, you just tell them, what should I order? Okay, yes, I'll have that. Like the order or the waiter is, at the end of the day, they don't know you. They don't know your preferences. Do you like spicy? Do you like non-spicy? Do you have allergies? Do you like your food? Do you like your porridge hot? Do you like it cold? What do you like? They don't know all of that. So there has to be an exchange of information before a valuable answer can be determined. And so they can't order for you, not properly. And anything that they did without vetting you, and if it did work, it's just by pure coincidence. There are some people where when AMC and GameStop were going crazy, if I told you on those couple of days where it was going really crazy that was the best stock to buy, well, that's actually what it looked like in the market because it was going up like crazy. But if you take a step back and look at the actual company and what's going on and the values of those companies, I think a long-term minded investor would easily tell you that that's not the right choice. That's not something you would willingly put your money in long term. It's more than likely a short-term investment play. So again, with these answers, you have to wear a long-term investment minded hat. And another reason why I look at things online and I cringe at times is you often get people telling you about specific stocks to watch, and they even be on YouTube, or stocks to buy and sell this and sell that. But you have to ask yourself, at what point am I actually receiving this information? Is it hours later, days later? They've already benefited from that information. Is this information stale? How stale is it? These are the questions you have to ask yourself when it comes to investing. So when people ask me it was the right stock to buy, I'm like, how much time you have? Because the answer is so much longer than what people want. At the end of the day, it's not an easy question to answer. Look, there are plenty of places where you can go online, you can subscribe to a newsletter, you can pay fees to understand or get the buy and sell or exit points of a particular stock. And you can even go on YouTube and get, videos where people will tell you recommendations, but you always have to ask yourself, how useful is that information to this very moment? How stale is this? How fresh is this data? Because the market updates in real time. So by the time a recommendation gets to you, it may or may not work in your favor. You always have to vet that. All of these questions, however worse or annoying they may be, they all point back to you as an investor. And that's something you always need to consider. If this is a concept that you're struggling with and it's something that you want to work on, I have just the video for you. So stay tuned for that.